Hello and welcome to another episode of Metal Effort. Today we're going to be talking about this hunk of metal, the Rockstead Shin. And this is going to be a little bit different than my normal videos in the sense that it's not a sneak preview. It's also not a full review. It's going to be a short-term review. I have been manhandling it for a couple days, and I think I have the measure of it as far as like the stuff that you can immediately figure out. And then I'll kind of speculate a little bit on the long-term use of this knife because I do think it's a major part of what this knife is offering. But before we get into the details, let's go ahead and do a size comparison. So we have our good old faithful, the PM2, and we have our Para 3. So you can tell it's a medium-sized knife, about the same size as the Para 3 in general shape and silhouette. I'll get a full-on measuring here. So blade length is just about 3.5, I would say. Handle about a 4.5, a little less than that. So pretty medium size, kind of one size fits all size for the knife. And we do want to do a weigh in. I think that will be important for this particular knife. And we're coming in at 5.39. Call it a 5.4. Definitely over the ounce an inch. So keep that in mind. And one thing you might notice, it's kind of hard at first, but it's got this mirror finish. So I'm just going to stick a pen right here and you can see how mirror polished that blade actually is. It's a DLC coated, so I just want you to get a little bit of an idea of what we're working with before we dive in. Also remind you that this is a 4K video. If you're on a Mac, you might need to use something other than Safari so that YouTube can let you raise the resolution. It's really hard to portray just exactly what this knife is over video, but hopefully the 4K can help. So let's get into the dent, the decent, the excellent, the nitpicks, and the terrible of this piece of metal. First off, in the decent, I'm going to talk about the ergos. The ergos are very good. Strictly speaking, just how comfortable is this knife? It fits perfectly fine. There's a little bit of extra room. It definitely curves your pinky on so it doesn't want to fall off. You have kind of this little groove that's helping you get to the lock bar. But it's kind of helps out with your finger placement. It locks you in. You have jimping. I'd be able to feel that a little bit better, but I got a boo-boo. And it's very comfortable. I was kind of surprised how comfortable it was. I wasn't sure with all the fluting if that was going to be annoying or not. It's not. There's no hot spots. And the clip does a good job of staying out of your way for the most part. You know, some knives have their little heel kick up a little bit on the clips. This isn't too bad, and I don't really have a complaint in regards to ergos. Next is the Stingray. So this little inlay right here, this is Stingray. I did a little game where I had 5 knives that I own with the prices of all the knives written down on a piece of paper, and then 3 people I quizzed on, all right, put the price on the correct knife. And nobody guessed that this was the $1,100 knife. And nobody also guessed that this was the Stingray skin. Most people think it's some kind of like granite. Once I tell them it's an animal, they think it's a lizard. It's very hard. You might think it would be a little bit squishier, imagining a Stingray because it's so soft. I don't know if people have touched Stingray before. But it definitely hardens up. It does give a little bit of traction, I guess, when you're doing like side cuts, maybe. But otherwise, I think it's mostly just for show. I don't think there's too much in the way of practicality, but it's still cool. The fluting, speaking of fluting, it is well done in its machining. You're going to have like some high points. So this is a user. You might see some light wear on it where those peaks are. But otherwise, it's well done. And gives it a little bit of grip on this side of the knife. It is not on the back. It's only on the front, the show side. But it's well done, so I can point that out. Next is the action. So you can, very smooth knife, you can flick it up. It's kind of painful for me to do right now, but I can show you. You can also middle finger flick, kind of a spider flick, the knife open. So very smooth. You got thumb studs on both sides. So pretty ambidextrous on the opening. You could do the slow, like Sebenza open if you wanted to. And it, very nice action. And so as far as like different ways to open it, I'm always a fan if there's more than one way. And I can do the spider flick. Oh, speaking of which, just to update, you could do that with the Spider Chef. Took me a while to figure it out, but there's just enough room on the lock side that you can stick your middle finger in there and open it up really nice. So kind of doing a similar thing with the Rockstead, and it is possible. So that's cool. The lock bar is really, really nice. It's a liner lock, obviously, but it's, let's see if we can see, solid lockup. It's like, I don't know, maybe 45%. And it's got some horizontal jimping, so it's really easy to get your thumb in there and push it over. Zero lock stick. It's very smooth on that. I mean, the entire knife is smooth. The locking, actually, it snaps over really satisfactorily, and very easy to get to, very easy to reach, and very effective and solid. It's very solid. I like that. Next is the centering. So you're going to see kind of a fit and finish theme going on here, but let's see if we can bring that into zoom. All right. There you go. Perfect. 100% perfect on the centering. Awesome. Next is the integral hand. It's not integral. It is two machine bits of aluminum, but unless I have it directly dead on with the light, you can barely tell the seam is there. You definitely can't like feel it at all. And if you rotate the knife in normal light, it's probably effectively going to look like an integral handle, but it's not. That's how well it is kind of machined together. It is beautiful. I like that. The jimping on the top, I can't feel it with this thumb, but I'll go left-handed for a second. The jimping is great. I really am a fan of kind of aggressive jimping. Like, I want you to piss or get off the pot. Either no jimping at all, or if you're going to do jimping, have it actually like want to grip your fingers. I've been having a lot of examples of knives where the jimping's there almost for decoration. Like it's so polished or the edges are so, filed down that it doesn't actually give you any kind of grip. Also want to point out just the thumb stubs have the jimping. This is actually pretty comfortable. It's not pointy like the Sebenzas are. Very practical, and they do their job well. I like the aesthetic of how the jimping on the spine of the blade, the perpendicular jimping, as well as the horizontal jimping kind of match. It's a nice design aesthetic. This jimping does not do much, but we'll get to that in a little bit. Overall, those are my decent aspects of the knife. So let's move into the excellent. I've got 3 excellent things, and they pretty much all resolve around this blade. This is, I think, the main reason why you should consider buying a Rockstead or want to have one at all. So there's some interesting things going on. First off is this polish. I kind of mentioned it early on, but the level of, you could see the camera. I mean, you can see the whole room if I do it right, but that polish really is like hypnotizing, because it's on this DLC blade. And so it's not just a normal mirror polish. Like, you can really see pretty much, everything off of it as I just rotate it around here. It's a very, very awesome finish. And I like it. It gives it that distinct, like, premium feeling. And it's cool. You can tell they put a lot of time and attention to it. They mention in the paperwork and on the website, if you're going to buy one, that if they mess up even just a little bit and scratch up onto the blade, they got to start completely over. So really just awesome manual labor that was put into this blade, and it shows, and it's something very unique. Now, that's just kind of an aesthetic aspect of the blade. My next excellent part of the blade that I like a lot about it is the grind. So this is kind of two things going on, and both, when combined, are one of my favorite blade grinds. It's a Scandinavian grind. It's not like a full flat or anything like that, but it's also a convex grind. So the blade, I don't know how well you can see this. Yeah, it's like too near, but it's gonna come to a point, and there's no like secondary bevel or anything like that. It's just one convex to the apex of the knife on each side. I think the slang for this, it would be like a Scandivex. It's a convex grind. It's a Scandi grind, Scandivex, or to really confuse Scandinavian person. There's a Japanese term for this. I think I'm gonna botch this, but Hanzakiri. That's probably better, but something like that. And it's a very practical, very strong grind. The edge is just so well supported, pretty much, for twisting and contorting type of movements that might chip or roll an edge. This supports the edge much better than like a normal like V edge would be. And so, this is why bushcraft knives tend to have like a Scandi grind, and a lot of people want to put on a convex if it doesn't come with a convex sharpening. So this is kind of cool, kind of a novelty on a folder that, if I got stuck in the wild and I needed to do some bushcrafting to like make spoons or whatever, like this knife could definitely handle that job, and it would be a pleasure to do. So that's kind of cool, and it's just not something you see every day on a pocket knife. And then lastly in the excellent is what the steel is actually made out of. And it's kind of a mysterious steel. I'm trying to find information on it. I'm not really getting too much in the way of like testing or anything like that, but it's just, customers' testimonials basically on how awesome this steel actually is. Now, this particular one is using their YXR-7 steel, which is basically a tool steel. It's got a lot of carbon in it, so that's why this is a DLC thing. It's not just a visual thing. They're actually trying to seal that edge, and only at the very tip of the edge can you see where the DLC stops. I mean, it's so finely, moved up to the edge. It's incredible, but there is an edge there, just barely poking out of that DLC. So this would be something that you want to keep oiled up if you're in a humid area. And the hardness, they actually give you the precise HRC rating for this particular knife, and this one is 64.8 in the HRC. So combined with a very tough tool steel that's been heat treated perfectly and has a very high toughness, that is where they're able to claim these really, really crazy edge retention kind of estimates. So from Rockstead, they're saying that because of this edge, because of the grinds, because of the steel, because of the hardness, the heat treat, you should get about 2 to 3 years in between sharpenings, even with like normal use, which is amazing. That's awesome. And this knife has kind of lasted the test of time. This was made in 2016. It's been about 3 years, and it is still laser sharp. I mean, really, really clean. And it's not like a full flat grind, which might be even better slicer than most, but this is amazing. So obviously you probably want to do like food prep and stuff like that with something, that edge being susceptible to corrosion. You'd have to be really careful to get just that barely tip of the edge cleaned off and oiled up afterwards. So that might be a little bit of a hassle, but for everything else, all your other knife needs, I think this would be, a fantastic knife. Now, let's get into the nitpicks. Now, the nitpicks there's a lot of them, but they're pretty small. They're pretty minimal, and you would expect there not to be, too many terrible things going on with a knife in this price category. It's not always the case, but first things first. If I turn the knife over, close the blade, from this half of the knife, it kind of looks like a gas station knife. Like if I just, dig up like another knife, like a crappy Microtech knife, like they don't look that different. Like this is garbage. This is worth like negative money. But, you know, is this $1,000, $1,100 better than this? You know, you wouldn't guess that. And so I feel like it might have been cooler if they put a little bit more effort onto this side. Maybe a nicer clip aesthetically, or something that's got a little flair or deep carry, or I don't know, maybe some machine work on this side. Just kind of basic. That's all. Not a huge deal. Not a huge deal. Next is this clip. The clip is functional. It's, I don't know. The hardware is like exposed. It's raised up. Maybe, you know, if it was like flush inside the knife would show like a little bit more effort on the clip side. I don't know. It's fine. I guess maybe I'm being a little douchey, like expecting more than this. But I'm a douche, so there you go. The other kind of sad thing about it not looking cooler and not having more like machine work on this side is that the knife is pretty slippery. So I mentioned this jimping here. It doesn't really do anything. It's too broad. It's too polished over, or rounded over, I should say. And then this is just like aluminum with some DLC on it, and it is super, super slippery. So I don't know how hard you want to be on this knife anyway, but you know, it's not gonna be for people in the Vaseline factory, as Nick would say. So I don't know. Maybe a little bit of the Stingray on this side. You know, it's kind of weird to have an inlay on the side sometimes, but in this case, it would be just for practicality of being able to grip something. But alas. Next thing is just the weight of it. You know, we measured it earlier, and it's at, you know, 5.4 ounces. For a 3.5-inch blade, that's kind of a chunk, you know, and it doesn't look that bulky. And so it's kind of surprising when you go to like grab it and it's like, whoa. Not only is it heavy, but my next nitpick is it's not all that well balanced, in my opinion. The weight of the blade is substantial. It looks like a normal blade, and the stock thick is like pretty heavy, but it just seems like the steel is like more dense than normal steel. And so like if I, you know, do like a little knife balance thing here, it's definitely favoring this side by quite a bit. And so in your hand, you know, because it's slippery, and then combining with the knife just want to kind of like tip forward a little bit, it doesn't give it quite that balanced feeling. You know, if I'm going to have one half or the other be, you know, a little bit more heavy, if it's not even, I'm going to want the back half to be a little bit more heavy, in my opinion. You know, you might want it for different things for different knives, but, you know, just comparing it to like a PM2, it's, you know, pretty well balanced. It feels like one solid tool, where this feels like, you know, they've got this godlike heavy duty, you know, blade, and then they're attaching something to try to control the blade instead of it feeling like one piece, if that makes sense. The DLC, you know, is necessary on this tool seal to kind of seal it from corrosion, but there are, you know, a couple of examples where it's starting to come off a little bit, like right here. And keep in mind, this is like a user for somebody for like 2 years. The previous owner had been using it for about 2 years as an everyday carry. So I'm not like super concerned about this because he was using it so much, and considering everything else, like the blade looks basically brand new and perfect, aside from like that one little blemish right there. So, you know, it's not a huge deal. You got DLC coming off on the thumb stud. This one's not as bad, but you can definitely see it starting to come out. Aside from those three little bits, you would not be able to tell that this was a 2-year-old blade that, you know, was coming from somebody that was using it that much. And then lastly, you know, some people might like this, but it's this weird little fuller here. And I have no idea. I try to find this out, but I'm assuming this is actually a practical purpose on what they need to do to actually make this knife. I'm guessing that they have some kind of clamp that clamps it down so that they can, you know, do the convex grind, get the polish, and not make those mistakes, you know, be able to like tape it down, clamp it down, and then for hours and hours. So I think that's why all their shins have that little thing doohickey right there, is to like pinch it down while they're doing the blade work. Otherwise, I don't see any other practical purpose. It doesn't really look all that great in my opinion. But if my intuition on why it's there is true, then, you know, I'm okay with it. That's fine. I can't imagine how difficult it would be to get a blade grind like this and a polish like this by hand without having something, you know, lock it down precisely in place. So lastly, we're going to move on to the terrible. And I only have one terrible thing in it. It's like a medium terrible thing. It's not like huge. Now, the action on this is good. It's extremely smooth. In fact, I should probably, you know, have talked a little bit more about the action. It feels like a Sebenza, really, like a really high-end Sebenza, like a really good version of a Sebenza, if there's such a thing. It's glass, and it's like Gumby in the sense that it's very little pressure to move it. There's no jumps at all, and it's like Gumby. It'll stay like even there, and then boop, into place. So I enjoy the action. The action is good. It's easy to close. It's easy to open. You have equal pressure going both. And like I said, I can do the flick here. The problem, that might be terrible for some and might not be a big deal for others. It's because of the weight of the blade and the smoothness of its action. The detent is not really all that strong. So I can just do a simple shake and open. I'm not flicking it. I'm just shaking it out. And not only can the blade get out of position, I can actually open it up almost like it's a freaking automatic or something. So, you know, some places that's gonna make it so it's not legal to carry, depending on the state or city that you're in. So that could be a deal breaker for some. Now, the person that owned this knife loved the detent. It was just enough for him. He could flick it up this way, and he was really happy with that detent. So if you're a fan of like softer detents, I wouldn't say it's like weak. And I think a lot of what's working against it, as far as the blade being able to come out like that, is just how heavy that blade is. I really want to kind of communicate to you guys just how heavy the blade feels. It's just, it's solid. It's a solid blade, and so I wouldn't be surprised if it was very difficult for them to get a detent that's going to hold that gigantic blade in place. And if you do little tiny shakes, it's okay. I wouldn't say this is dangerous, but I can definitely do it a little bit more aggressively and get it to come out pretty much every single time. And not just come out, but open. Where, you know, other detents, if I do it with my Spidey Chef, I can do that, you know, if I give it a really violent shake. But most knives, you can't do that. And I've gone on record saying that this is a very strong detent, so that's not going to be a really big issue. So I hesitate to even put this in the, you know, terrible. But, you know, like Nick says, if the cop is angry at you, he's going to have no problem doing this. So, you know, with the Spidey Chef, I can get in there and I can tighten it up. If I need to, I can make it not such a loose action. You know, there's no blade play, but I want the action to be good on this. And because of the action, that detent is just not going to be strong enough to hold it into place when I do the really like violent shake. But if I want to adjust the shin, I can't. And this is kind of a twofer on the terrible. I'm going to partner it up in one thing. You can't take this apart without voiding the warranty. And I'm not really all that excited about taking it apart anyway. So the action is so good, the centering is so perfect, I don't really have a reason to get in there except for to maybe, you know, tighten it down a little bit more so it's not so easy to completely open just with a shake. But it is a thing. All right, so what's the conclusion that we have on this knife? The conclusion is I think this is going to be a really awesome knife for a very small few people. The blade, the finish on the blade, the you know, edge retention that they have gotten out of this blade is unique and special. It's both form and function in very high amounts for the blade. And Rockstead makes some really cool, you know, models. This is kind of on the lower end of their folders as far as like price and fanciness on the blade. But there's other models. There's one, I think it's called like RYO, and it's got some awesome, amazing fluting on both sides and some cool fade anodizing. It has a clip that's on the back of the blade that like clicks up, and then hides itself when you're not using it. Like, that's some really cool innovation, and it kind of fixes a lot of the nitpicks that I had with this particular model. And so I think while I am not like so in love with this knife personally, this particular model, that I'm not going to keep it, I need to move the knives to get more knives to you guys and try new things. But I think I can recommend Rockstead in general, and I think there's probably some really cool models out there for people that want kind of the high-end exotic, steel and finish and performance that Rockstead is offering. And I think in some regards this is probably one of the better blades out there in the world for just performance and just polish and effort that's been put into the blade. And so I think that is going to appeal to a lot of people. And for the rest of us, I think, just the cost of the blade and, other aspects of it might keep us away from it. But overall, I can make a recommendation to the people that are looking for those aspects of a high-end knife. So that's my review. It's a short-term review, but a long review. I apologize, but I want to get all the info to you and get my opinions on record. So have a good one, everybody, and take care.